Hello, everybody, and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast, Arichcomiclife. My name is Richard Gill, and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 800 comedians and counting over the last 46 years. I'm delighted to welcome my guest today, the wonderful Neil Delamere. Yay! Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm good. Wow, 40 years. That is a long career of 800 comedians, isn't it?
Unbelievable. My first comedian was Les Dawson in 1976 on holiday.
Wow. Okay, I mean, I was only talking about Les Dawson to Justin Morehouse recently. He was his specialised subject on Mastermind.
That's right.
Like there's some stuff that dates, for whatever reasons, for social reasons, and taste change and all the rest. But Les Dawson, I think you can take Les Dawson, plant him in any era of comedy, and he would pivot to whatever works. He was so good.
He's unbelievable. He's other than Morecambe and Wise, I think he's my favourite comedian.
That's pretty esteemed company to be in anyway. The two of them.
Oh,
I think that's fair enough.
Just the best. And then I got the bug for it. I was hooked, and I've been going ever since.
And it's been downhill since then. So you saw your favourite comedian first, and then 799 times you tried to replicate the first experience of losing your comedy virginity, and all the rest of us. We're all rebound comedians, essentially. That's what this is.
No, I have a lot of favourite comedians, but
Good.
he was, I thought, phenomenal. Anyway, never mind about me. The interview's all about you, my friend. Thank you so much for doing this. We're going to talk for the next 45 minutes or an hour or so about your career, and I'd like to kick off by asking you, how did you become a comedian in the first place?
Well, I did software engineering when I was in university, and I just did it because my brother actually had done it, really, and I knew I was going to get a job from it, so it was kind of a placeholder at the time,
Right.
And then one of the first gigs I ever saw was in university, and I sat on the floor and I saw of the bar because it was so rammed, and I saw Dara O'Brien, Deirdre O'Kane, and Eddie Bannon was the first gig I saw.
Wow.
And I thought, well, this is amazing, and so this is probably 2002 maybe,
Right.
2000 around then, and 2001, and I just thought it was great. I thought it was brilliant, and I thought this will go on the bucket list, but I had no intention of doing anything seriously. It was, I'll do 5 minutes and I can say I've done it, like a parachute jump or a whatever, bungee jump or anything like that. Yeah. So myself and my friend wrote it down, and we went into the International Bar in Dublin, which is this tiny little room which holds maybe 60 or 70 people, and has no microphone, and it was set up in the kind of late 80s by Ardal O'Hanlon and Kevin Kildee and Barry Murphy and everybody who's anybody in Ireland. Most people have started there. And I just asked for 5 minutes, and I did 5 minutes and kind of got the bug. And then I said, I just keep doing this for a while now and see how we go. And then I won a competition for RTE, the kind of national broadcaster in the Republic of Ireland. And that gave me a bursary of a couple of grand. And I just thought, well, I can pay my rent for a few months with this. So I'll give up the job and just see. And I thought, listen, in 6 months, I'll just go back and do what I did. And I never stopped, really.
Wow, that's brilliant. Once you get the bug for it, it's like watching it. It's like, it must be like such a high when you get an audience laughing at you from the things that you've written. Yeah,
it's also so novel as well. Like you like the first time you do it, you're absolutely terrified, and anybody who says you're not terrified is completely lying, because you've no frame of reference, Richard. You have no idea what's good or bad or indifferent, But hopefully you try a new place, and you try a place that they've built it up, that the person coming on next is only 5 minutes. It's only going to be 5 minutes, and they're new. So most audiences will suffer that for a few minutes.
Yeah.
I do think most people will die in their first kind of 8 to 10 gigs, and I think it's just about, if you get 2 or 3 decent ones under your belt before you die, you might be okay. Whereas if you die in your first 2, you're just going, I'm not a comic, and you stop. Which is a shame, really.
So your first gig, that was just 5 minutes long, was it? You just did a 5 minute set?
5-minute set, yeah. I had a friend of mine from the software engineering company come with me because I think there's two ways to do it. Most of the time, there's you bring no one. You might bring one or no one, or you bring everybody, you know.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, I really wasn't confident enough to bring more than one person because I want to deny it ever happened if it was horrendous, you know. And he sat there, and I kind of run some of the stuff by him, and you could, I was so nervous. I could see him, and he was just miming punchlines, and he was like, and then the thing.
Oh, mate.
But I got through it, and it went well. I mean, I'd like to see. I don't know if I'd like to see it now. I have an idea in my head. It went well. I mean, it was probably horrific. Like, if you ever find your old notebooks or anything, and you read stuff you've written down, you just go, "Oh Christ!" But that's the way it should be. Like, you shouldn't be looking at stuff you wrote 15 years ago and go, "That was brilliant," because then you haven't developed at all. I would be genuinely worried if you thought that was brilliant. You know.
I am a regular friend of many a new comedian at pubs going who are trying the medium out, and I go and I sit there, and if they're very good, I laugh very loudly at them. But a friend of mine invited me along 20 times to his first 20 gigs. And I got sick of laughing at the same jokes.
Wow. Yeah.
He had me in the front row going, please laugh here. And it did help. But, I mean, he's now running his own club abroad. But
Wow.
You know, I'm delighted that, you know, I can support you. Obviously, I'm passionate about it. But did you go through a period where a similar thing was happening? You were inviting your friends to different pubs?
Not really. We were kind of jealous as well of the London scene in that if you worked really hard in Dublin, you might do a gig every week or maybe 2 weeks.
Right.
You know, like it's a small city, you know.
Yeah.
So these guys, so it could take you a year to do 40 or 50 gigs, whereas, you know, we then mainly through the kind of BBC competitions, or after a few years, say at Edinburgh or the Kilkenny festivals, you'd meet lads and and you would realize, by the way, I say lads is a term for girls and boys in Ireland, and just to clear it up, and you would suddenly realize that this girl or this guy had done a million gigs, and you just I didn't even really realize that there was that many gigs in different cities, and they could gig every night if they wanted. Now, a lot of them were kind of fairly brutal and fairly tough to do, I think. But you could certainly kind of accelerate your development if you're in a bigger city, you know? Because you got to remember, at that stage, like, there wasn't much stand-up on TV, and, you know, it wasn't YouTube. So you weren't familiar necessarily with what was going on in the rest of the world, you know?
Sure, yes, of course. So you're on stage doing your comedy. What specific things do you like to talk about? Do you have any themes? Do you have any ideas that you want to get off your chest when you're on stage, or?
It depends. I do a lot of kind of topical panel shows, and I've done for years. So sometimes if there's something very big in the news, like the week that we're recording this, you and I are talking about this, I think if I was on a stage, I think there'd be 5 minutes about the Super League. The League lasted not as long as a deodorant lasts, apparently. Somebody said it was 46 hours. And which is kind of deeply depressing, that they thought that could work. So sometimes if there's something very big going on, I think a lot around Brexit, but generally speaking, when I'm writing a tour show, you kind of think, well, I'm going to tour this in 6 months, so this can't really be topical unless it's kind of something that lasts for a year or 18 months. I don't do kind of very specific topical things when I'm doing a tour. But in terms of bigger themes, nothing springs to mind, really. It's always very hard to describe your own stuff. That's for somebody else to describe, I think. But I suppose largely I would classify myself as a storytelling comedian, in that my friend, who is a comic and is also a doctor, also a psychiatrist, I think that's why he gets on very well with a comedian. I had to do a blurb once, and he went, "No, well, you tell stories. That's the stuff that you do, and that's the stuff that I like watching you do the most." So, it's just kind of general stuff that's happened.
Just general that happened, yes.
But what's going to be a bit weird is that when we all go back out after COVID, and hopefully that'll be soon, what do you talk about if you haven't done anything? So what do all the people who tell stories talk about? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's a good point. You know, that it's gonna be interesting how they construct their shows around such a tough time.
Yeah, and how much the appetite for an audience is there for everybody to talk about COVID. I mean, I think that's the one difference between, say, if the Edinburgh Fringe Festival happens, right, and is very successful and all the rest, and we wish the best of luck. You know, if a reviewer has been to 6 shows and all comedians have talked about COVID, and hammers the 6th person for saying, "Oh, he just talked about COVID," or "She just talked about COVID for 10 minutes," you go, "Yeah, but a punter who has chosen to see the show won't be going to see 6 shows, so they might not necessarily be as COVID fatigued as you are." So I think that's something for them to remain cognizant of as well.
And also as well, the punter wouldn't necessarily know, because they'll be going on the comedian's name, and when he gets there, if he starts talking about it, he might not want to hear it because of all the difficulty they've had during the lockdown. You know, so it's a very thin line. It's gonna be very interesting when it does get back to some sort of normality.
Yeah,
very much so. To date, what has been your best and worst gig?
Ooh, the best one, I don't know if it was the best gig I've ever done, but I think it was probably one of those landmark gigs that you look back on. I did the first time I ever did Vicar Street in Dublin, which is
brilliant.
It's a really good venue. It's about 1,100 seats, and it's the one that in recent years comics all want to do, you know. So the first time I did that in 2007, and I was just brilliant. It was the only gig my mother has ever been at, actually, and to my family. It was the first time I did it, and I did have friends there that day, you know, and I got a standing ovation, mainly because I think I knew everybody in the audience.
That's brilliant.
And it was just wonderful. Yeah, it was just great. And we put the gig on, and because no one comes to you and goes, "Do you know something? I think you can sell that room." You just guess. You go, "I think I've done some TV and I think I can probably can sell it." And you know, and social media wasn't quite as prevalent as it is now. So you don't know if you put up something, "Hey, who's coming to this?" You know, you could guess whether you could sell it or not. So that was very special. And the worst gigs I've ever done.
I can't believe you've had many.
I had 11 Edinburgh ones, and I threw 3 of them out.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a horrendous gig. Actually, it was. I kind of was listening backstage, and I heard 3 people talking of the 11. I mean, this is your first Edinburgh. It's really tough, and I heard them talking, and I think they'd just gotten freebies or something, last minute freebies, and I thought they don't want to be here. So I went out anyway, and I got the vibe after a while that 8 people wanted to be there, and 11 people did, and 3 people didn't. So I just said to 3 people, "Listen, off you go. Listen, go off now. You're ruining this for everybody." You know what I mean? I gotta take my shot here. And the 2 of them didn't speak English, and then the 3rd person was translating everything for them. So I threw them out in a kind of a pleasant way. And then for the last half an hour, it was great, because the other 8 people were like, "This is the weirdest thing we've ever seen in Edinburgh so far in our experience," and they kind of got into it. It was like doing a bunker at that stage.
Good on you for doing it. If clearly they weren't there, if they weren't there to watch the comedy, then good on you.
Yeah, but I just think you get kind of, Edinburgh is like some sort of blacksmith's forge, in that it forges some degree of iron into your soul, you know. But the first time I did the Fringe, because you go there and no one knows who you are, and then you come back. The first time I came back, I did 50 minutes at a club gig with no material. I was just so happy that the people were there. There was 50 people in a room that held 50 people, and I didn't have to do a full show, and it was just oh my God, this is the easiest thing I'll ever do. So probably some of those early Edinburgh ones where you do your first, there's 10 people in the room, they've no idea who you are. You do your first joke that works in the club, it doesn't work, and you go, "Jesus, that's the best joke I have." I haven't been doing this that long. That's the best joke I have, and now I've gotten nothing, and it's all downhill from there. And then you look at your watch, you know, you've done everything you've ever written at that stage, and you look at your watch, and you've done 27 minutes, and you go, "Oh, fuck's sake."
Unbelievable.
So probably one of those gigs early on.
let's move on to Edinburgh. I go to the Edinburgh Fringe every year for my holiday. I work in London, but my hometown is Carlisle. My home city is Carlisle, so I go up to Carlisle for the summer, and then I go up to Edinburgh for the Fringe because it's only an hour away. And I first went in 2005, and I've never looked back. I go and see about 50 shows in the week. I can't get enough of it. Tell me about your very first Edinburgh Fringe. What year was it? Where were you playing? What were you feeling?
2004.
Just the year before, yeah.
And I was playing in the Gilded Balloon.
Great venue.
Yeah, great venue. And I suppose I didn't know anything about it was the big thing. And I would, looking back now, I think, it was probably a bit early. And, you don't really know how to construct a show. And, you kind of go to Edinburgh. And it's only when you're there you go, oh, this is what these shows are like. Because there wasn't at that stage, there wasn't the same level of previewing and the idea of previewing.
Right.
And, so the people who went up to that stage who were very ready had previewed their shows around the circus or done stuff in Soho Theatre or whatever down in London, Where sometimes we were just kind of arriving up, which is not how you should arrive, really. But I do think in terms of an experience, you're kind of 24 or 5 and you're in Edinburgh and you're all going through the same struggles that everybody else is going at that level. And I don't think I've done an Edinburgh since that was as enjoyable apart from the show stuff, Your first Edinburgh, you're really kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? You're really in it together with other people at the same level, other new beginners.
You're part of a...
It's very, very social the first time I did it, really social and really like, did you get a review? Yeah, I got a review. Was it good? Yeah, it was okay, but I don't like this line. And, it's like buying experience. It's like going on a college course you have to pay for because you come back and you are renewed and slightly battered. And it tests every part of you, really, But I really, 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 really enjoyed it.
Oh, it's an amazing experience for folk who have never been. I highly recommend it. It's just the best thing. What I love about your act is that you go out onto a stage and you're determined to make an audience laugh, and you don't leave the stage until they're laughing. I have cried with laughter at your stories over the years that I've seen you. What do you think makes a good comedian? Wow,
that's a big question, isn't it? What do I think makes a good comedian? A terrible childhood, Richard. No.
Oh dear.
No, I had a lovely childhood. I can't complain. Sometimes I wish really bad stuff had happened to me so I could do a better, deeper Edinburgh show. What makes a good comedian? I do think what you said there is simple, but I don't think it's stupid. You have to want to make them laugh. Yeah. And sometimes, particularly when you start, right, you can't control all the parameters of the gig. You can't control all the variables, You get to a point where you can set them. So, when you get to a point where you can sell your own tickets and you go to a theatre, I'd like to play at this date. Is that okay? And they say yes. And this is how much the tickets are. And this is how long the show is going to be. And this is who my support act is going to be. And you can control all those things, Whereas at the start, you didn't control all of those, and you sometimes did a gig that you were starting off, and it wasn't. You weren't starting off at 0. You were starting off at -1 or -5 because the Champions League was on behind, or because the microphone didn't work, or because the person in front of you, was a kind of an amateur MC. And in those days in particular, you had to go, I'm just going to turn this gig into a gig. I'm going to make this a gig, and. So you first had to have that determination. So I think that's kind of very important in the early days. So what you said there is you want to make these people laugh. I think that's invaluable. You can't write that off, particularly as you start. Yeah. When you go from doing clubs to doing theatres, another thing happens is that when they're going to see you, the switch in your brain should go, I've always wanted to make them laugh, but now they're paying to see me. I really am responsible for their night out. Yeah. They've gotten a babysitter. They've driven here. they've donated 2 hours of their time. They're paying your wages. Make them laugh. Do the job properly. And in terms of just the practicalities of trying to be a good comedian, I think when people ask you, when you come to say any tips, I always just go, write as much as you can and gig as much as you can. There's no substitute for that. There's no YTS scheme. There's no scheme you can go on. I know it's courses and all the rest, but nothing will give you the experience rather than just doing this.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the joy of it after. It's the joy of it after 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. Like you see Jerry Seinfeld, one of the most successful comedians in the world. Jerry Seinfeld, when he's putting a show together, how many shows have you written? Like he must have written hundreds of shows. He still has to go and see if other people think that's funny. I mean, we all get an idea from experience what we can sell and what makes us laugh. But he and we have to go into a room and talk to people like you and rely on your feedback and sounds coming from you. So how could he ever get bored? He's in his 60s. And there's still some element of doubt, which always makes it interesting.
Yeah, very much so. But I think as well, I totally agree with you. I think the more you just have to keep gigging because it gives you the experience of doing it, and it also makes you a better comedian, whether the gig is good or bad. All the comedians have to go through the bad gigs to become better comedians, I think.
Yeah, I was talking to I think it was Adam Hills once, and he said to me that Rich Hall had said to him, don't even come and talk to me until you've done this for 10 years, sort of thing. Meaning, that you only find out how you want to do it after that long,
Yeah.
And that's, I do love people. I do love watching people who figured it out early. I always thought, I saw Ivo Graham years ago.
Yeah.
When he was just starting, and I remember, I think he was only 19 or 20, and I was like, that fella's going to be massive.
Yeah.
And I said it to him, and I said, I think you're going to be massive. And I think he's going to be even bigger than he is now. I know he's very successful, but I think he's going to be even bigger than that. And I said, because I think you figured out how you want to do it, and you're very identifiable and very authentic. That's a real thing for all the really big ones. See, I think audiences are really clever. I think they're very intuitive. I think that if you do something that is slightly off, the instinct, the wisdom of crowds, they look at you and go, I'm not buying that. He's not like that. Yeah. Why would I go and see someone if I don't think that's what she's really like or what he's really like?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are you phoning this in? Whereas if you look at all the really brilliant people, or certainly the people that I admire, the one thing, apart from them being really funny, that is always comes across is they're all authentic. They're all very much what you think they should be like.
Yeah. That's what
Kevin Bridges is Kevin Bridges. Ivo Graham is Ivo Graham. Michael McIntyre. Like they're all different people, and like they're entirely different styles of doing it. But you think, well, that's how they want to do it.
That's exactly how I look at it, because your example of Ivo Graham, I've watched him since he first began, and at the last Edinburgh I was at in 2019, he did his hour-long solo show, and you could tell everything was working brilliantly at the specific performance that we were at, and I think he had a great run with his show. And that's one of the reasons why I write the blog, to watch the comedians develop and become authentic and make just enjoy the whole experience of watching them. It's an extraordinary gift to have if you have it, and you've got it in spades, my friend. Before you go on stage, how do you cope with any nerves? Do you suffer from any nerves at all, or?
I don't really.
No.
I don't really suffer from nerves the vast majority of the time, because it's places you've been before, and you tour at the same venues.
Yeah.
And most of the time, you should have your work done at that point. It's like your state exams, a bit late at that point, Richard. So you have to, you have to have it done. So when you're doing something new, maybe I did a news quiz for the first time a few years ago, and I was just, my hands were cold before.
Wow.
I was like, why are my hands cold? And I went, oh, you're nervous. That's what this is. My hands never get cold. My wife says it's like a superpower. And it's pretty harmless. X-Man, isn't it? What can you do? I can control the weather. Oh, my hands are toasty. But if I'm nervous, I try and remember that nervousness is essentially the same feeling in your body as excitement.
Yeah.
So it's the same heart rate, it's the same sweaty palms, it's the same fluttering in the stomach. So two sides of the one coin, and just go, And also, it's not life and death, is it? It's not life and death, Richard, is it?
No.
Like, you're not doing a surgery.
No, exactly.
Or something,
yeah. But
And you got into this. Usually what makes you exciting is doing something new.
Yeah.
And if the fact you're doing something new is, that's why you got into this. So what's the point in, it's kind of pointless. I try and rationalize myself out of the nerves, I suppose.
Yeah. What it does do for me though is it cheers me up no end. If and you need something, I think, positive in your life, and that's what I get off comedy. I love to go to a gig on a Friday or a Saturday night and just laugh like a drain if the comedian is very funny. I in order to do my blog, I went on a half-day writing course, and all the other people around me wanted to be reviewers. And the woman came up to me and she said, we forgot why we invited you. And I said, well, I'm not a reviewer, I'm not a critique, I'm not a diarist, I'm not a reporter. I'm a member of the audience. I'm out to have a good time, and my blog is an enthuse for everybody who can actually get up and have a go. And they never bothered me again. They said, oh, we really like you. That's a great answer, So, and I learnt a lot. Whereas the others were all reviewing and all the rest of it. It was really interesting. So I think obviously there is a purpose to it, but you're right. It's not life or death,
Oh. No, it's not life or death, but
yeah.
I wouldn't have any problem with reviews as long as they provide a service, and as long as they're fair. A lot of the time, they are not necessarily as informed as they should be. But
sure,
that's the case with TV reviews or radio reviews or anything else,
Mm-hmm.
And again, you become, depending on what you're doing, they certainly become less and less prevalent. Less prevalent. Sorry, less and less important as you go on. Like if you, I can only think of maybe two places. I think the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and the Melbourne Festival, maybe, or New Zealand, where a view of a show that is unknown begins to coalesce based on reviews, and then that show might be the hit of the Fringe. Most of the time, people are taking a punt and going to see something in Edinburgh, or their friends have told them, or they know the person from TV. So they're less and less important as they used to be. Particularly as once you get to a point where there's so many shows up there, particularly in Edinburgh, they can't review everything, and so it's harder to build that sort of majority groupthink around something.
Whenever I plan to go to Edinburgh, there's 3 or 4 friends I go up with. And I always plan an enormous spreadsheet of everybody who I want to see and ask them who they want to see. And normally it's such a cross-section of all the comedians, because I like to see established acts, and I like to see new acts. I like to see plays about comedians. I like to see storytellers, joke tellers, the whole gamut of it. And it's such a rich mix of
I did a show once there, and my friend... he came to see the show because he was in it as a younger man. Well, actually, as a teenager, I had some video, and he was in the video. Right. And I said to him when he saw my show, I said, "Did you go and see anything else?" And he said, "No." And I said, "It's the biggest Fringe festival in the world. Why did you not go and see something?" And he said, "Well, where would you start?" And that was something that really struck me. That you and I are kind of embedded in it and know our way around it and can navigate it. But it's overwhelming if you don't know where to start. So that's why people go and see someone that they know from TV. Like if you're only in Edinburgh, I always thought that was weird when we were starting out, and you'd meet lads and they'd be like, "Why did no one go and see my show?" And after a while I went, they're not coming to see our shows because they don't know who we are. And they've got 2 nights in Edinburgh and they want to go and see a couple of things. All you can hope is that somebody in your early days, on the off chance they're going to risk a third unknown soldiers show, you might get them. And your job at that point is, if you get them, that they come next year.
I think yes, I agree. I think the turn of the coin though is purely that it's to go and see somebody you've never heard of,
Yeah.
hoping that they're the next big thing.
Yeah.
I always remember we went to see an act, and there was myself, this was years ago, and there was myself and my friend, and there was a drunken Scotsman in the front row. There was only 3 people in, and this comedian walked out and very enthusiastic and realised there was only 3 people in, and he went, oh, he said, I tell you what, I said, because there's only 3 people in, I won't bother with the show tonight, and I'll buy you all a drink for coming along, and thank you very much for coming along. And the Scotsman in the front row went, no, I've paid my £6, I want the hour. And he had to perform it. And of course, rightly so.
Wow.
Yeah. Exactly.
That comedian was never seen of again.
No, he hasn't. No, he wasn't.
He's now a fisherman in a trawler.
He hasn't.
Off the coast of Greenland as he shuns any contact with the human race.
Yeah.
So bereft is he of spirit now. He is broken.
Yeah. Well, I've never seen him again. Anyway, please describe, if you have one, a writing process and where you get your ideas from, in particular for solo shows, hour-long shows.
Ooh. The writing process for a solo show is a notebook on your phone. Right. And you're just walking around, and every time you think of something, you key it into your phone. And then, I suppose, if you view, say, August as your point of, you have to have a show ready. My year is normally I am touring the show I've written for August in kind of November, December, January, February, March, April. But while I'm touring that, I'm keying in the things into my phone that will be the next year's show.
Sure.
And I sit in a room and I write some things down on a computer, and I know roughly how many words I speak a minute. So I know if I have, say, 6,000 words or something like that, that's roughly an hour Edinburgh show sort of thing. And then when I'm learning it, I walk around the house talking to myself, basically. And that's where the little kind of toppers come in, and that's where the little extra line comes in, or that's where a leap of fancy comes in. So that's kind of it, really.
What I think is precise, you might disagree here, but what I think is precise about your act is just how many jokes you do manage to get in a specific amount of time. It's extraordinary number, because I think they're called toppers, aren't they, where you have another line after it.
Yeah.
And you're very, very good and very funny at doing that, because I'm laughing away and then you have to stop and there's another one and then another one.
Well, I always thought that was the difference between someone who was good and someone who was amazing, was that if you could, and that's very kind of you to say, because that's what we try and get to,
yeah.
You can get to a point where it's just rolling, and it's and if you think about seeing somebody for 20 minutes and there's only 2 or 3 minutes in that where you've not been laughing. So I try and think
exactly what I was getting at. Yeah.
Yeah, I try and think of a scenario, and then I try and think of how far I can push that.
Yeah.
And how many times I can change the angle, and and it's weird, because sometimes you don't need to write that line that creates the next laugh, if you know what I mean. So sometimes you see someone who's like, I think somebody like Jason Byrne sometimes on a physical capacity, when he does something and he gets the audience, like he hasn't necessarily written another line to keep that momentum and laugh going. It's a twist of his body or a facial expression. And like when Jason hits, Jesus Christ, he is I look phenomenal. At it and I go, oh, wow. Like, he has had me, double over in laughter.
Yeah, you and me both. Yeah.
And I think that sort of momentum is the holy grail. And that's why I like watching one-liner merchants.
Yeah.
But every second line has to be a setup to the next gag. So for me, it's not the one I like the most to experience as a punter.
following on from that, how do you remember all your jokes and routines? Do you have pointers in your head that will guide you on, or
I link them usually.
link them? Yeah.
Yeah, I just link them because it's an easy way to remember. So if I have, for example, in this conversation we've had at the moment, if I try and write some jokes about a book I'm reading at the moment,
Yeah.
and I had some jokes about talking to you, I would go, Richard is from Carlisle, and I'm currently reading books by a man from Carlisle, which is M.W. Craven. I don't know if you've read these books, but I just read 3 of them in a row, and they're really good.
Is that
But I would
true?
look for the commonality between the two of you, and that's how I would remember it. It was just, there would just be some natural link between the two of you, and you can usually find a natural link between any two things. There's always something, you know.
Wow.
And then that's just how you remember it, really.
So N.W. Craven is from Carlisle.
Yes,
Wow.
and he writes the Washington Post series.
Wow.
And yeah,
Never knew that.
that's why when you say Carlisle, or if I wanted to talk about Dublin, having spoken to you,
Yeah.
for example, I don't know much about Carlisle, but Roddy Collins, who was Steve Collins, the boxer's brother, used to manage Carlisle, obviously. So you know, there's always links, and it just helps me to navigate from one part to another.
Wow.
You know,
I have many friends in London who are from Ireland, and I've never been to Ireland. I've never been to Dublin, and I've always wanted to go. And one of my dreams is to go to Vicar Street, Dublin, because, as you said earlier on, it seems to be a major venue that all the comedians want to play.
yeah, it has the perfect mix of it's like a big club.
Right.
It's not even like a theatre. It's like a big club.
Right.
And on a really great night, it replicates that feeling that isn't staged and isn't reserved, that sometimes a grand old theatre can be like. You know, it's that more raucous, more low ceiling, more anything can happen here sort of vibe that comedians love.
Yeah,
but yet with 1,000 people.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a whoosh of laughter if you're doing it right. So that's the mecca here of that size venue.
And when I go back up to Carlisle, they have the Sand Centre there, which is a big 3,000 seater theatre, and they also have the Fire Station, which is a little 250 theatre, 300 theatre, that a lot of comedians do go for. So if ever you're on tour, please do go, and I'll come and see you there.
Is that in Penrith?
Yeah, Penrith. Yeah, that's only 20 miles away.
I've only learned all these places in the last week or so, reading about
brilliant.
the fells of Cumbria.
To date, what has been your comedy highlight?
Comedy. I got a real kick the first time I ever did a panel show on TV with Dara O'Brien, Andrew Maxwell, Ed Byrne, Cal Murphy. And I was 24. It was my first time on TV, I think. And I remember sitting there and looking across the table at whoever was on that show, you know, and there was maybe 3 people on that show, and they had a combined level of experience of 40 whatever years. And I had been doing this about 3, something like that, 3.5. And I was like, okay, yeah. And the first joke that landed, that I remember the first joke landing, just going, oh, like it. I think I can survive this. I think I'll get away with this. That was a real wow moment. I'll be honest. That was
surprised. That sounds fantastic.
First time I was in the radio theatre, the BBC Radio 4.
Yeah.
Which is many years after that, because I kind of stayed in Ireland and just in Edinburgh mainly because I was so busy at home and I was presenting stuff and doing stuff and touring and stuff. So I only relatively recently, like many years after that first initial thing, feeling of excitement, I was in the radio theatre and on the news quiz. But so obviously the news quiz on Radio 4 is a venerable institution, but that building where you're going, like Spike Milligan.
Oh, it's extraordinary, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
I was kind of got a bit of a tingle there. I was like, this is brilliant, you know.
I've been to the radio theatre many times. I've watched a lot of news quiz recordings and Now Show as well. That's the other one. that they do there. You regularly appear on TV on BBC Northern Ireland on the TV show The Blame Game.
Yeah.
And you're a regular panelist on Radio 5 Live's Fighting Talk.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this. Do you approach what you're going to say on radio and TV? Is that different to the way you approach stand-up comedy, live stand-up?
Yeah, to a certain extent. So I have done panel shows in the Republic and in the North. I suppose that's probably what I'd be best known for in terms of TV.
Yeah.
I've presented documentaries and I've presented shows from the Montreal Festival and stuff like that as well for TV. But in Ireland, I've been known for panel shows, and then in the UK, some people would watch the Blame Game, but obviously it's only on BBC Northern Ireland and the News Quiz and 5 Live and that sort of stuff. I suppose they're all different, but a panel show, a lot of it is who you're on with. So if you're on a show that you do all the time, you do learn rhythms. And by rhythms, I mean the rhythms of the other people. So you don't necessarily know what anybody's going to say. But I do know when one of my fellow panelists, I know by his body language, if he's off on a run, I know, and I can just sit back and let him go and then feed the beast every so often, give him a suggestion and sit back, you know. So you do learn rhythms like the midfield of a successful international football team. Brazil 1970 on our best days, and the current Irish team on our worst days.
Not Carlisle United.
Not Carlisle. But in terms of what you can say, I mean, obviously there's language restrictions. Yeah. There's content restrictions. You learn early doors that if you know what's counterproductive? Filth. If you do filth at the start of a show, first of all, it'll never air. But also, in terms of the audience in the room, filth is always funny. If you then try and switch back to Boris Johnson's policy on supporting money going to the COVAX campaign, that's a quite difficult pivot to make. And the live audience will go, please talk about filth again. So, you learn things like that.
Yeah.
And you learn, little technical things like you do something, you've actually made him balls of the setup. Stop. Know that'll be edited out and just restate the position again. So you know that from doing years of panel shows, Obviously don't do that on a live show like Fighting Talk because that's just going to be weird.
It's all experience again, though.
It's all experience,
yeah.
And so on something like Fighting Talk, which Colin Murray hosts, he's a great host, but you're trying to make him laugh, not necessarily because he awards the points in that show, kind of in a fairly arbitrary fashion, and not necessarily the other panelists. So you have to write a different type of joke sometimes. You have to write a joke that isn't the boom punchline. You have to write a joke that's kind of on the way to that. I try and sometimes catch him unawares. I try and describe something in a stupid way or make an analogy that's a ridiculous analogy that just catches him and he goes, what? So it's a kind of a different route to the same end response.
Brilliant.
Which is kind of, again, keeps that interesting, you can't do that whole thing that people talk about, that rule of 3 joke that people would do when they start comedy in particular, that rhythm. You can't do that with someone who's very experienced and knows that the third thing is going to be slightly different than the first 2 things, So they're the things you learn, really.
Yeah. We're all living in very strange times. It's been a very weird 18 months. Have you found online gigs? How have you found online gigs as opposed to live gigs? Have you done many online gigs?
I've done a few, yeah. I mean, I think they're fine if you have the stuff. If you're doing stuff that you already know is funny in a live context, it's fine. But I mean, I don't really see the value in trying brand new stuff out. I think it's too inconsistent, I suppose.
Sure, yeah.
I have done Sarah Millican's new gig a couple of times. It's so well run. She's such a great gig to do, and it's really fun. But even Sarah would say to you, if it works at this, that doesn't mean it works in real life, and if it doesn't work at this, doesn't mean it doesn't work in real life. What it is valuable is keeping you ticking over and keeping your comedy muscle writing the jokes, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, I can't wait to go back to a live audience. Like we have been doing our panel show with 3 people in the room, 1 person on Zoom as a guest, and then an audience on Zoom. Sure. And it's good crack, but I mean, in terms of the immediacy and in terms of that thing that we talked about before, the wave, the momentum.
Yes.
With a Zoom audience, you say on a topical show, you can go da 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 da, boom, and there's your punchline, and you can wait a little bit, and then the audience will go for it. But you can't hammer them with line after line after line after line after line. It's difficult because the delay really impacts that momentum that you want to try and build up.
Yeah.
By its nature, I think a lot of those panel shows now are. I've heard some of them, and I don't know if they are as collaborative with what you see on screen. There isn't as much bouncing back and forth just because it's just too technically difficult.
Yeah.
Even though they're very good shows, I've seen a lot of good shows, but they lose a little bit of the interactivity.
Sure, yeah. I totally agree. I look at online comedy as a super substitution to the real thing. If it hadn't happened, I don't know how I would have got through lockdown, because I need a comedy fix every week. I go to Always Be Comedy all the time. I go to the Happy Monday Sean James one. I go to the Return of the Crack Jarlath Regan's one on a Friday night. He's fantastic. And when it first started off, there was no audio at all. And so I was sitting here laughing loudly at 4 walls. I thought I was going to be taken away. But then they opened up the audio, and it helped with the timing of the jokes, and the comedians could chat to the crowd, the front row crowd, and hear the laughs and everything. But I'm like you, I so miss live comedy. I want to see you soon again at Headliners in Chiswick like I did last time, and you were fantastic. We are going to go again, hopefully in May.
That experience of you laugh in a room together with other people, some of your friends, but some of your strangers. But it's a collegiate, collaborative, human, social, primeval activity. And sitting on your own in a room isn't a replicant for that, a replica for that, even a substitute for that. I don't know.
Yeah, very, very much so. I think as well is that when you're sitting with a live audience, it's of the moment as well. You'll never get that again, and that's the magic of it. You know, anything can happen, and it's wonderful to see. Who are your favourite comedians, past and present?
Oh, there's so many. It depends on. It depends on the form I'm in. Off the top of my head, you know who I've always loved? I'm just trying to give you an unusual tip rather than the kind of mainstream one. Kevin McAleer. Have you ever seen Kevin McAleer?
I've heard of him. Have I seen him?
People would know him. He's in Derry Girls, and he plays the boring Uncle Eamon.
Yes, yeah.
As a live stand-up, Kevin is absolutely brilliant. It's just this really weird, rural, surreal stuff, and it's brilliant. Tommy Tiernan's fantastic. He does a show at the moment on TV where it's a chat show where he doesn't know the guests. He doesn't know who the guest is. Guest comes out, he interviews them. Brilliant. Doesn't know who they are, hasn't done any research, and might know them but may not know them. And that's fantastic.
Sounds genius.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's one of the best we've ever produced. In terms of stuff that we were talking about before, like the Edinburgh Festival or Melbourne or something, I love at those festivals going to see someone who does this in an entirely different way, to the extent that you look at him and go, I have no idea how you even came up with that. I don't even know where the thought of that began to make that funny, you know? So I like to go and see, like I saw Sam Simmons.
He's brilliant. He's great.
And watching,
tremendous.
3/4 of the audience love it, but 1/4 going, what the fuck is this? Is massively entertaining as well. Yeah, I mean, I remember him doing a bit where he had a pine cone going up a wall on a piece of string, and he just lit it with a spotlight and played some music. It was hilarious. So I look at that, Richard, and I go, I don't even know where you were when you thought of this. Did you see someone do this before? Did you think a pine cone isn't funny, but stringing a pine cone is really funny? And I don't know how it works. So I love
the
that.
magic. The originality is extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So I seek them out when I go to the Edinburgh Festival.
Fantastic. The reason why I asked that question is that there's a section in my blog called "The Ones That Got Away," and I've written about 25 comedians who have either sadly passed on or I just haven't had a chance to see.
Okay.
And in that list, I almost had a chance to see Dave Allen in London. I wish I had.
Wow.
He'd have been amazing. But Norman Wisdom, Frankie Howard, Bob Monkhouse, I would have loved to have seen.
He was the one, yeah. I that documentary BBC 4 about him.
Oh, superb. Yeah.
See, that's the thing. I think sometimes people forget when they see someone, and comics used to go into game shows and all that stuff, or they go into being film actors. A lot of the time you go, like, I can guarantee you that they were very good at what they did at some point because they wouldn't have gotten the opportunities after that. So you might see them as a game show, but if you went to see Roy Walker, for example, who did Catchphrase for so many years, it can be guaranteed that he can do
brilliant
what he says he can do. It might be more old-fashioned than the current kind of way of doing it.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you he has the skills.
Oh, he was. We saw him twice. He was fantastic. He did 2 years in a row at the Edinburgh Fringe, and again, what was really interesting about him was that the pauses in his act, he knew where he was going to get laughs, and the more pauses he did, the higher the laughs. It was amazing. I would say some of my highlights are Bill Hicks. I saw in Manchester. He was incredible. Rick Mail I saw in Carlisle. He was extraordinary. But it's on and on and on and on and on. I saw Peter Kay in a room before he was famous, in a room in Manchester, and he was fourth on the bill of 5, and I missed the 5th act because I was laughing so hard, and I said to my friend, he's going to be a superstar, and just extraordinary. There's so many stories around the block.
I saw Patrice O'Neill at a gala in Montreal, and I interviewed him afterwards for TV, and we had to cut the interview a couple of times because the cameraman, the camera was shaking. He kept laughing so much, so the camera was doing that.
That's
he
brilliant.
was genius.
And of course they're doing their job well. Like me, before you were a comedian, or whilst you are a comedian, do you go to a lot of comedy gigs as a member of the audience?
No, I don't.
Everybody
do that.
says that.
Yeah, that's one thing that happens. While you love it, in my experience, for most comedians, they see behind the curtain a little bit, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And what happens is, I think the healthy thing to happen is that you don't laugh quite as much because you see how things are constructed.
Sure.
But when you then see the rarer event that really makes you laugh, you can kind of deconstruct that to the extent that, it's so rare. I think you really appreciate the skill involved in something like that, and that's sometimes why I try and go and see a lot when I go to Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Because it is a place where you can see easily loads of amazing things. And like when you go to Montreal, I don't know if you know the difference between Montreal and Edinburgh. I'm pretty sure you do, given that you're so experienced and going to comedy shows. But maybe your audience might not know that that's geared largely towards the gala, and it's a 10-minute slot or a 5-minute slot at a gala in front of 2,000 people, and they all pay a lot of money, like it's $120, $150 or something.
Sure.
Whereas the Edinburgh Fringe Festival is all about your full hour-long show. So I definitely go to as much as I can when I'm up there, because otherwise I feel guilty. Go and see stuff. This is the biggest arts festival in the world. Go and see how other people are doing this. So
yeah,
like stuff I've seen there that really got me, I can appreciate it, I suppose, since I've started doing comedy on a different level.
Of
And
course, yeah.
like it's funny, Don Rodolfo was on a couple of nights ago, and I saw Kieran O'Dowd do that in Edinburgh, and it's just like it's brilliantly written, but it's so silly.
Yeah.
I was absolutely in bits laughing at that. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in Edinburgh, you know. And I came out walking out with that, and I was raving about it to my wife for days, and same. But we appreciate that, I think, on a deeper level, really, I suppose.
Yes,
you know?
of course, yeah. If you're on a comedy bill, do you stay and watch all the acts that are on the bill?
Depends if I have a car or not. So if I'm in, depends how hard it is to get home or not.
Yeah.
I do watch everybody in front of me though.
Sure,
I won't just walk out. I try and see as much as I can.
Much as you can.
But you also have to try and keep some semblance of a normal life. So you can get home to watch. Time to watch Line of Duty on BBC 1+1.
Yeah.
You know, I will do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Aren't we all? It's just the best.
I'd love to pretend otherwise. No, I watch everything. I'm a comedy encyclopedia. Ask me about anybody going on a 10:30 in Headliners and Chiswick, and I can tell you everything they've done. It's the love of the art form, Richard. The love of the art form. No, no was the answer. I see a lot, but I don't see everything.
You're not as bad as me.
No, I'm not as bad as you. I think you've some sort of psychosis, to be honest with you. Some sort of sickness there. There was a critical moment in your life when you needed a hug and nobody gave you a hug. Now you're talking to comedian.
That must be it.
That's what it is.
Just before we go, and I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. It's been an absolute delight.
Vice versa.
Is there anything else you would like to say? Have you got any online gigs planned? Have you got any podcasts? Are you on social media? Anything like that? I do have a podcast, but I don't know if it'll be necessarily out when you release this epic. Right. Is the podcast on right now?
No, not yet. No, we've done some episodes, but we haven't dropped them yet. Right. I am doing my first arena gig in the Belfast SSE Arena. Right. Hopefully, the vaccinations program will be over by then because they are currently using it to inject people. Yes. It's where the Belfast Giants play their gig. Play their games, I think. I think that's what ice hockey is. Is the Belfast gig? Say that again? What date is the gig? It's February 2022. Well, so February next year. That might be my first visit to Ireland. Well, come along. See you. Come along. There's plenty of room. It's a big owl hall. And if I don't go there, I will definitely see you live again soon. Absolutely. Because you're a very, very, very funny comedian, and you're highly recommended, my friend. Wow. Thank you very much. High praise indeed from the person who likes Les Dawson, so I'll take that. Please keep doing what you do, and all the very best to you. Where can people find you on social media, just before we go? At Neil Delamere on Twitter and Facebook, and Neil Delamere Comedy on Instagram. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, my friend, and all the best to you.